If you cannot trust your team to make decisions, what are you doing? I think what happens in a lack of trust, I think results in a ton of process. I think a lot of organizations default to this. If as a product manager, you want your org to be really fast, this is how to optimize it for the engineers that are actually building the software. The goal should be to not need to tell your engineers what to build. You want fewer meetings, you want less process, and you want to retain and attract the strongest engineers. If you want to be a product-led organization, which I'd argue is kind of the future of a lot of organizations, having these will make you quicker. Hello. Hopefully I can do a good enough job to meet how I was just described. So, and also on a side note, this is how an ant must feel if it stands in front of your TV screen. So my name's James. I'm the co-founder of a company called PostHog. I'm going to give you a tiny bit of context on what we do, and then I'm going to dive into how we work and how we get other teams to work. Our goal is to equip every developer to build successful products. And to do that, we have about 10 products in one that help understand user behavior, act on it, understand your data, and so on. So we do product analytics, session recording, feature flags, and a whole data warehouse, and a whole bunch of other stuff. We're quite a new company. We did Y Combinator in 2020. But we've kind of blown up a little bit in the engineering world, which I think is why this might be very interesting from a product manager's perspective. This is the only time I've ever presented in front of product managers. So wish me luck, this might be terrible. We've had about 100,000 software teams have started using our software in the last 4 years. So a couple of thousand a week are signing up at this stage. It's mainly startup oriented. Again, I'd be on a beach in the Caribbean if it was 100,000 Fortune 500s. We are now getting pockets of adoption. Our focus is, just for context, on new products. The second part of our product strategy is get in first. So it's going to be a startup building something from scratch, or it's going to be an enterprise, but a new product that they're working on. So just bear that in mind a bit. I think this could be quite interesting because I think there'll be two outcomes of this talk. One, you're oh, this is really different to how we work. There are some ideas here that I want to implement. Or two, this is terrible, but at least it's thought-provoking because it's that bad. So let's see. Radical transparency. And this is the hedgehog version of me when I'm relaxing. Whoa. The goal of a product manager should be to not exist? Crap. So this is clickbait, but I'm trying to wake you all up. Sorry about that. I'm going to word it more carefully. The goal should be to not need to tell your engineers what to build. May or may not apply to every business, but this is how I think about it. Because this is faster. Fewer meetings. If you want to build stuff as an engineer and you're orienting your company towards speed, which I'll touch on in a minute, you want fewer meetings, you want less process, and you want to retain and attract the strongest engineers. Sort of if as a product manager you want your org to be really fast, this is how to optimize it for the engineers that are actually building the software. It is a strategic question how much speed actually matters, and it's one I definitely think you should ask. So for example, if I'm trying to build the iPhone 272, or whatever the latest one is, polish, design, control are probably more important in your product success than velocity. Listening to Christina's talk, if you're building an AI thing, I would argue that velocity probably matters more because it's so unpredictable what you're working on. So kind of a really iterative approach, I think, is more important and will result in a better product outcome. For my business, PostHog, we believe velocity is more important. We've made a conscious choice. Velocity matters more to us than design or control. And the reason for us, our product strategy is really basic. 3 things. All the tools, we want to provide every tool that a software team needs. We want to get in first with early stage people. Our goal is not to replace an existing stack of stuff. That happens, but we don't focus on it. And we want to be the source of truth for customer and product data. The first bit of that strategy, all the tools in one, that is a lot of stuff. We want to build tons of things really fast. We have 10 products. We have teams of 2 engineers building a product with tens of thousands of weekly active users. And so speed is really crucial, and our whole company is skewed towards speed. Even if you work in a bigger company, perhaps your department, you could skew this way. Why listen? I've already talked a bit about this, but we've got loads of customers. They're also all software teams, so we track their usage. We can literally see how teams are doing, and we can kind of see the input. They're probably skewed heavily towards the US. We're kind of the standard at least in Y Combinator, we're the standard tool that YC startups will now use. Like 50 to 55% of each batch use our software, and the remaining ones are building hardware, don't have a software product, basically. Legal notice, please don't lynch me. The strong opinions, form your own ideas. So, very, very basic, and sorry if this is overly simplistic, but product managers do two core things, I think, repeatedly at most companies. One is aligning people, like, hey, what do customers think? What do execs think? What do engineers think? What do sales think? Customer support, and so on. You're trying to pull all of this together. I think the second is determining the roadmap. So most businesses or software companies, you're figuring out, probably off the back of a lot of conversations, like what should we actually build, and engineers will decide how to build it. In other words, I think this is compensating for a poor context setting and a lack of transparency. This is why you have so much work as a product manager to do, because you're trying to get from execs what they want or get from customers what they're thinking. How can you make these things happen more naturally so your own workload is decreased? So I'm going to talk about kind of transparency, and I'm going to talk about autonomy. So it's like a dream, right? That your engineers just magically ship all the stuff that you wish they would ship, because now they feel ownership over that stuff. They're more wedded to what they're working on. They're more excited by it, and their speed will go up, and they'll stay at the company longer, and you'll put in better engineers who want to be more empowered. You cannot have an autonomous team that decide what to build if you don't share context. Like an engineer with no idea what the company is optimizing for will just build the wrong thing. They'll probably upgrade your database or refactor a bunch of code or whatever. Whereas if they can feel like, oh god, if we don't increase our like enterprise adoption, like enterprise contract values with our software, we're going to go out of business. Like they should see that kind of stuff. So the foundation of this is trust. Really simply, if you cannot trust your team to make decisions, what are you doing? I think what happens in a lack of trust, I think results in a ton of process. And I think a lot of organizations default to this. I think once you have got an awful lot of process in your company, by default, you're not trusting people anymore. One of the values we have is trust and feedback over process. This is really core. It's probably something that needs to come top down, or at least in a department that you just say the conscious choice, I'm hiring people that are good enough that I can trust them with decisions. The easier way of doing this is to say, I'm an idiot. My team are smart. I should listen to them. Share everything by default. So make it hard to not share stuff. For example, like every calendar invite, anyone can just show up to it at our company, or every like our exec meetings, we run on a sprint basis, just like all our engineering teams, but we'll share our sprints. They can just look up. We do everything in GitHub. Our team can just see what we talked about and what the conclusions were. Often what happens next is I find that teams have started working on the stuff we talked about like 10 minutes ago because they'll be really interested in what we're talking about because they want to put it into their work. We have a communication hierarchy, which probably seems a little bit shocking. So I'm going to go through it. So pull requests. This is the order of preference I have if we're communicating internally. The first preference is to build something without asking, which is not conventional, and I'll talk about why that's possible. I'm going to give you an example. So pull request comes first. So this is literally like, I haven't bothered communicating. I haven't sought consensus from a lot of people internally. I've just built a thing. And the best example we had, like I would say all of the major innovation in our company, the most important things that have ever happened to us have come from letting engineers decide what they're going to build and just building it. We're a multi-product company. Our first part of product strategy, all the tools in one, exists because one of our engineers built the product next door to us when we had one product. I thought this was a terrible idea. Companies are supposed to build one product first. We should be like $100 million run rate before we build our second product or whatever. And he was like, well, there's a bunch of users who are asking, like we had product analytics first and that was working well. And he's like, I'm going to build session replay so we can watch video clips of users doing stuff because lots of users are asking for it. And I think I can build this in a week. And I was like, I think this is a bad idea, but on principle, I'm going to let you build this, like, go for it. He built it, it was wildly popular, and it's now our second biggest product in terms of revenue. And then it unlocked the thought of, oh, what about like the other like 10 products or 50 products we could build here? And now we have 10 products today, and we're aiming to build more than 50. There are some things that make this easier for us than at other companies. I think one concept is, with your product strategy, are you building a completely kind of new category-defining product? So for example, are you the first business in the world to create the concept of like a coffee cup? Before, back in the day, people used to carry water in their hands and it would spill everywhere. But you're product geniuses, and it's very hard to come up with that concept from nothing, like the first person who invented the wheel. Or are you in a really competitive market? Like we're in competitive markets with every product we build by design. Like we want there to be competition because it means we get product market fit for every product super easily because we already know they're useful. Other people have figured that out. But we differentiate. We're like, oh, we're cheaper for every product, and we're integrated by default because we have all of them in one spot. Because we're differentiating rather than building something totally non-existent in all of human history, it is, I think, easier from a kind of product taste perspective to come up with what we're building, which I think is really important, and it's made it a bit easier for us. So again, this might not work very well if you're building something totally category defining, which might apply to a lot of AI products, for example. Second, so just build it. I think, again, even if you're building something category defining, one of the other beliefs I've got is that most human beings aren't magical at product. Like I don't think upfront you learn as much as by just shipping and getting a product into people's hands quite often. That might be a skill issue on my part and my company's part, but it is something we've repeatedly kind of seen. The way we de-risk an engine just shipping something, and if they apply it to a whole user base of like more than 250,000 end users, could go horribly wrong. Like it could cause scaling issues or a load of backlash on social media or whatever. And so the way we release software is all designed to let this happen too. So for example, we'll ship a new feature we'll use feature flags to ship a new feature to like a handful of friendly users. Then a handful of users can opt themselves in through our platform, where they kind of click a button to switch on a feature preview. And then we'll switch it on for everyone and say it's in beta, and then we'll switch it on for like 10% of our whole user base, and then literally just the whole user base. So we'll do very, very iterative, gradual rollouts, which is also really important if you want to let engineers have this level of autonomy. Issues next. Again, this is kind of an interesting way of working, I guess. Because we're trying to empower engineers to decide what to build, we don't use like Jira or any kind of separate issue tracking. And we do have lots and lots of feedback. Like we have users in public even, like hundreds of thousands of end users and stuff. So, and all of them are raising issues and bugs. Like our own team are also creating issues. We just do everything in GitHub, and it's kind of simple. I think there's a massive cost of having too many tools being used at once. Like where I used to work, we would have like, stuff's in Google Docs, it's in spreadsheets, it's in email, it's in Slack, it's like in like at least 10 places. And as a result, just no one's got any idea what's happening. So I was like, actually, I'd rather just pick a tool that's kind of basic. It's the tool that's already where the engineers are looking. And it's pretty good, for us at least. So we do issues next. An issue is company-wide. So every single person from sales, support, engineering, execs can see what people are thinking. And people can filter and do whatever they want with this stuff. But the point is everyone can see it. Public Slack channels or whatever your chat product is you're using. And then you get into the dark world of direct messages, emails, and fax is a joke. But basically, as soon as you start having people DMing people about things they want to work on or whatever, that introduces loads of problems. Other teams can't see it, so they can't go, oh, I can see that this team is building feature Y, and I'm building feature X, but I could piggyback on top of the feature they're building because I've seen it exists. If you're in DMs, that won't happen. It also creates other random organizational problems if you have a heavy DM culture, like politics. Like I'm complaining about this other person or whatever to someone else. We've got rid of one-on-ones entirely at PostHog, or almost entirely, for this reason too. Because a lot of organizations are based on top of one-on-ones and this sort of tribal knowledge and stuff. And I think that creates space for like politics, information in silos, all kinds of issues. So when we make team changes, which we do constantly because we've been growing really fast, I literally will go, oh, I want to make a team change and restructure. In the public Slack channel for that team, they will get a message saying, hey, I think we should split this team in half. I think X and Y should be the new team leads for the two teams that we're creating. It's all out in the open. People can raise feedback on it. I've spent now maybe 10 minutes composing this message as opposed to doing 6 or 7 hours of one-on-ones with every person and kind of convincing them politically and demonstrating that behavior. That's how you get stuff done. I don't want that at all. Communication quality still matters. Sharing all your stuff is not enough. It is still important to have simple and repeated messaging, especially around product strategy. Like in all hands, for example, you've already heard me like multiple times go, because we want to build all the tools in one, this is how we should structure the company. And it happens at a team level. Like, because we want to get in first, we should build the feature that a startup would use, not the one the enterprise would use if you're prioritizing. And we do communication where the team are, which is all hands, Slack, and GitHub. We keep it really basic. We don't ask them to go into a whole new suite of tools that they don't want to use. We share our strategy and progress against it. So everyone can see company mission, company metrics. They can see our board meeting slides, and they can see the notes from the board meetings and stuff as well. So we've really, again, the equivalent might be at your department. We are at least sharing like everything that's happening, good and bad. On the product side, and I'll expand this a bit because it's probably particularly relevant, we have quarterly goals. Again, optimizing for engineering, I think there's another thing here where the standard is to do OKRs from Google, where you set output-based metrics for every team once a quarter. It's kind of a typical way of working. We started doing this, and I realized, this is too difficult from a product perspective for an engineer without a product background to interpret. So we used to have goals like increase activation, like increase retention, or increase top of funnel adoption, or something like that. Instead, when we plan, we've gone, hey, we're deliberately not going to call it OKRs. We're going to call it goals to make a point. We'll have a discussion with the team. We have small teams. We have teams that own each product. They're usually just a couple of engineers. And we'll talk through, like, okay, this is what the company is aiming for. We need to increase our top of funnel adoption. We want to become ubiquitous, for example. Or we really need to get more products out. We haven't shipped a new one for ages. That's the output that we're after. I'm in this meeting, like what's going to happen next if you say, hey, I want to increase our activation? If you're up from a product perspective, you decide what to build and then build it. In this meeting, we will talk about the output we want, but we're going to make assumptions together over what we need to build to achieve that output. So what I want is your goals are literally a list of things you're going to build. I will make the assumption with you that these are correct in this meeting. And if over the course of the quarter, we're like, oh, this is dumb, activation is getting worse, or like this hasn't helped top of funnel at all, we'll just change them. And the reason this matters for an engineer to empower them is they're not sort of existentially wondering, how do I solve activation? They're like, we've already decided this stuff when I had like someone coaching me from a product perspective. I've decided what I need to build, and now I'm just going through the list. It's kind of easier. These are all shared, every single team, this doc is shared. I can look at any team's goals, like they're on our website. And we also share internally, there's all the context for why these goals have been set, which can be almost more powerful than the goals, or it is more powerful than the goals themselves because of how it works. All the sprint plan, every team runs on a sprint basis, and we synchronize these so they're all at the same time. And I can look at any team in the company and see how last sprint went, how the next sprint goes, and people use this information a lot. Every metric is shared. We do this at a company level and at a product level. We do these growth reviews for every product. This is a way of setting context. The product managers at PostHog will run this. They'll go, hey, here are like all the metrics for revenue. Here are all the metrics for usage. Here's how support is going. Here are like the 6 companies that churned. These are all the reasons why I think they churned. These are kind of requests we seem to be getting quite a lot. And we'll just run through this session with the engineer, the engineer that leads the team. And we'll say, hey, like, here's how your stuff's going. Like, here's how your output is. What do you think we should do about it? And then they might change then they'll just change what they're going to build, even if it's different to the quarterly goals we set. They'll just modify the document. And every single piece of feedback is shared. So we track like brand mentions online is a big one for us because we're product led. So we have a lot of users talking about us on social media. But also we track like if customers churn, they fill out a survey, that goes into Slack. And again, we're putting this all into Slack where our team are. Every user interview will get put into Slack. What else? Yeah, those are kind of the main things. But like, there is a constant cycle of feedback being shared, and this is good. Like, this will be lots of positive stuff, but it'll be lots of negative things too. We go further. Like as a company, we share. Like this is more of a cultural point around trust, but like fundraising, people seem to want to keep really secret for some reason because they worry about employees' reactions to it. I will share before we fundraise with our team, like, hey, this is our philosophy for fundraising. Like, you can look that up on our website if you want to. During, like, hey, we've got 3 offers. This is what they are. After, everyone shares when they fundraise because it looks good. But sharing it during and before. And again, it's more of a cultural thing that we do to encourage people to just share and be open. We share profit and loss. We share revenue. At a team level, we also share those kind of metrics. So like if I'm on our team that does product analytics, they can see like all of their revenue. Everyone in the company can see their revenue, but they can see how much we're spending on people in that team. We can see how much we're spending on infrastructure and so on. On people, we share pay structure. Like you can look up how much a product manager at PostHog would earn in Munich at any experience level, for example. This gets rid of organizational debt. People talk about technical debt a lot and under talk about organizational debt. I hate the idea that someone who's been at the company for 5 years, well, they probably haven't been because we haven't existed that long, maybe 4 years, could earn less than someone new because the new person's got more experience, but might be worse at their job than the person who's been there a long time. So I think fairness is really important, and we're very rigorous with this stuff. Since the second employee we hired, we've had a public calculator for how much we pay everyone. We share like hiring plans. We share when we don't, hiring decisions. We share when we don't hire. When we fire people and let them go, if it's for performance reasons, which it basically always is, we'll share internally, like we've let this person go, and these are the performance-based reasons why. It's been amazing running these kind of meetings with people because it's a very clear, like this is what the company wants as context out of people that work here. And the team will rally around this. Strong performers don't want people there that aren't shipping or getting their jobs done. And it really has pulled the team together. It was terrifying the first time we ran one of these meetings, or like you put it in the all hands and we're like, hey, are there any questions? And it worked remarkably well to build trust with our team that were willing to share what happened. Everyone can see everyone's vacations, and everyone has personal README, which is kind of cool, or pretty much everyone. So everyone's written up like, this is how to work with me. These are quirks. These are things that you might not like working with me. So you can kind of just see what your colleagues are like, and they have a chance to kind of reflect a little bit. One more thing. You can actually share almost all this stuff publicly. There are probably not very many laws that stop you from doing this, and everyone seems a bit institutionalized that they don't share this. There's a weird culture of secrecy in almost every company for some reason. I'd argue the opposite. There have been I would say there have been 0 times, literally, that we've had a problem because of sharing information online. We don't share absolutely everything. Like if we let someone go, we're not going to share publicly that we let Joe go because he's terrible, for example. But nearly all this stuff we share. Product strategy, roadmap are all public. Oh man, what if competitors copy your stuff? It's like, they do copy our stuff. That's exactly what I want. Like, if they're copying us, they're not going to win. Or alternatively, it scares them off. Like if we say, hey, we're going into this space, and you can see that we're growing successfully, you're probably less likely to want to fight us, so you might pick something else if you're a new startup, for example. Okay, that's a bunch of stuff on transparency. How to increase autonomy. So you've done all this legwork. You've gone, hey, we're going to just do a better job of context sharing across the organization. Hopefully now as a product manager, your workload is already decreased. Like people can, if you've managed to make this change happen, your engineers will have a much better sense of what is going on and what you care about. The second bit is though, how do you help them make good, like how do you kind of coach them to think like product people, and how do you get them to make good decisions over stuff? So our way of working is kind of, as Thomas said, engineers decide what to build. There are some rails around this. My job at PostHog is to determine, like, these are the next 3 or 4 products that we want to build. And I'm also trying to figure out, looking across every product we have, like, how many people are in each team is ultimately a choice I have, because I'm trying to kind of connect that with, like, how much money we have, what our revenue looks like it's going to do, if we want to fundraise or not. And so I have a lot of things there that make that easier for me to decide. Often, though, these other products we come up with have, in practice, come from an engineer being like, it would be awesome if we could build like error tracking, because we already have all the infrastructure needed to do that. And we can use our existing SDKs, and I think we can do this in a quarter to get to an MVP. I'm like, cool, we should just like, let's put it on our roadmap. We'll see if people upvote it. I'll talk to some users, and then let's see how it goes. So I decide the order of the products, but within a product, the team entirely decides what they're going to build. They do not need, these small teams are designed to work with no outside interference as far as possible. So they don't need to convince anyone else in the company outside the 2 or 3 engineers that are working together what they're going to ship. We're like, and this sort of means that they know they have ownership. So for example, when we do a planning session, I quite often will turn up to the first bit of the quarter, the product manager will turn up, and the engineering team lead will show up. Sorry, the whole like 3 engineers might turn up to it as well. We'll go through, how did last quarter go? What are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats? I will then usually leave the meeting because that's the bit where then they go, cool, this is the stuff we want to build. I'm really trying to make sure that engineers feel that they are deciding, because they can see that they are deciding what they pick. They will pick stuff that sometimes that I don't think is the right thing to work on. They'll get challenged on it if they're building something that seems nuts, but we will ultimately go with them. Performance management is important. Like, we will let people go if they over and over and over again are making terrible decisions, and we've mishired in that case, or we're doing a bad job of context setting. But this has been incredibly valuable to us. We're comfortable with higher velocity from this kind of approach. Like, we have no product by default, is the way we frame it internally. If you need help deciding what to build, the engineer is driving the product decisions. They should talk to a product manager and say, hey, I'm really stuck. I have no idea what I'm building. We also have no product design by default either. We won't give them the Figma mock-up and then they implement it. The engineer can just build it, or they can go to we have got a product designer, and they can go talk to him and say, hey, I'm struggling with the UX for this thing. It feels complicated, or I'm getting bad user feedback, but I don't really know what to do. Those decisions are in the engineer's hands. If I gave the analogy, it's like if you're driving a car or a passenger, the engineer is the driver of the car. The implications of product managers are two major things. They create all of the input needed for decisions. Product managers do a much better job of this than engineers do, in at least what we've seen. Context, I mean things like what's going on in the wider market. Like what are the competitive features that we need to just be aware of that we might need to keep up with. It's things like, hey, the company is trying to focus more on top of funnel growth rather than revenue at this time. Which features would help with that? They'll produce they might do SQL. Like, we'll look at things like, oh, we've got a lot of churn in like enterprises right now. And these are the reasons why that's happening. Like, I've spoken to them. So again, I've asked engineers to do this before as an experiment, and I tended to get very shallow responses back. Like, teams are churning because they're not using it or whatever. But a product manager will tend to go deeper naturally, skills-wise. Like, okay, why weren't they using it in the first place? So this is a really crucial role that product managers play for us. The second is tracking the output of teams. So putting together these kind of growth reviews where we go through, like, basically your product as a business, how's it doing? And we've like segmented all of our data so we can see it at a per product kind of level, or even down to a feature level for certain things. There are implications for your exec team too. First one is trust. You have to make a conscious decision to go, are we hiring people that we can trust, or are we a process-driven organization? I think there are two ways of scaling a business. Process or autonomy, and you kind of have to pick one or the other. Like, at least pick one or the other. Don't pick something that's in between, would be my advice, and be really opinionated. So we've gone for, hey, trust all the way. There are some really interesting books on this, like Netflix, No Rules is a very extreme version of this. For example, I don't know if there are inspiring books about process. Second, the focus of the exec team, or anyone who's kind of a leader, it is on communication. It's not prioritization. So I will work really hard to explain what we're caring about, what's going on, how stuff's going. Like if we're trying to fundraise, for example, and it's like, oh, I haven't got like a bunch of metrics that investors are asking for. I'll just say, hey, look, I'm having a tough time because like we don't really understand cross-sell. Could you help with that? Like, we have a growth team who's a little bit different to other product teams. And like they will probably do a much better job of coming up with helping me understand how cross-sell works at PostHog, for example, so I can better explain it. So we'll focus on communication instead of prioritization. The other major thing that's important with autonomy is it is also a people problem. If you are hiring people that have very little or extremely narrow experience, and that's what they kind of want to do, they're not going to cope well, probably, in an autonomous environment. Or it's a risk that they may not. When we're hiring, we really proactively are looking for people with like more experience. So our engineers are fewer in number, more expensive, but have more experience. Like, we often hire one of the types of engineer we often hire is, I'm a disgruntled CTO at a struggling startup, and I just want to write code. I don't want to manage people. And we're like, great, like come here, you've sort of seen what it's like running a business, but you actually are a brilliant engineer, and you've sort of got to your level of incompetence. Go back down to where you're really good at building stuff, but because you've got this bigger picture, you'll be really strong. So we hire a lot of like not everyone is like this, but we hire a lot of like ex-technical founders of startups who failed, for example, because we really value that they've had to talk to users. Like engineers do sales at early stage startups. Internally, we refer to our engineers as product engineers. I think this is a term that is starting to get popular. We've written a blog post on this, and it's one of our most popular posts. They do three, instead of just deciding, like product managers decide what you should build, and engineers decide how we should build it. A product engineer decides what to build, they ship it, and they iterate with our users. So they're going through this cycle with ownership over all three of these things. Your structure matters an awful lot too. We have small teams. That increases the level of ownership, which I think is really important here, and minimal dependency between teams. If you start having to have like huge amounts of alignment between teams and you have high dependency, suddenly your engineers are not writing code and they're doing lots of meetings. Our structure, like if you want to be a product-led organization, which I'd argue is kind of the future of a lot of organizations, or you're going to get beaten by people that do build better products than you, having these like very, very small teams will make you quicker. And this is the whole reason we're structured this way. It is just speed. I think if we had a huge like engineering team of like 50 people, and then like a bunch of designers in a separate team and a bunch of product managers, you've got to hop between all these different places to get anything done. And like now you have a lot of bureaucracy happening. You probably have more control, is the upside of that approach, but it's not what I think most companies actually win on. Why does all this stuff matter? Basically this. So what is this? Is this Nirvana? This is what I just randomly, without his permission, took a screenshot of one of our engineers' calendars. And like this is what you're looking for if you want an engineer to be quick. As you have noticed, yeah, thank you very much. But this is why they managed to build a lot of stuff. Now I'm going to tell you about this engineer. He's called Eric. Please don't steal him, but he's on our website, so if you want to go for it. We built this data warehouse product, and we're like, Jesus, the biggest competitor for data warehousing is a company called Snowflake, who are an amazing company. They're worth $55 billion as a business. And we're like, are we going to manage to build this thing? It's the biggest competitor we've fought with so far. And by himself, he shipped a data warehouse earlier this year, has got 700, now we've, like fast forward like 4 or 5 months, and we've got 700 companies using us as their source of truth, syncing data to it. And this is one guy. He's got 2 other people. Someone else built ETL tooling, and there are like $25 billion competitors there, and someone else built the equivalent like BI. Obviously, this warehouse doesn't scale to the level Snowflake would. It's designed for earlier stage companies to use. But the point is, he's achieved like an incredible amount of technical work, basically because he doesn't have to do meetings. The ones he's got in here, like he's got a couple of stand-ups that he's chosen to do. He's got an all hands on Monday, which is me giving him context. Tuesdays and Thursdays are meeting free, particularly for engineers. That needs to be enforced by people who are in leadership. So like my co-founder, who is Dutch and incredibly direct, I think as a result, will be like, what the hell is this meeting on a Tuesday? I don't care what it's about. It's not happening. And so we're very strict with canceling stuff out. Yeah, this is kind of what you're aiming for your engineers if you want to ship fast. And engineers love this as well. This will make them happy. Ultimately, and this is my final slide, thank goodness, I believe that you gain, I think the reason I would default to velocity being the most important thing you can do in product. And my reason for that, which might be wrong, is I think you gain more information by doing stuff than by planning and aligning. Kind of like in the examples earlier of like we built an AI product, turns out that when it's in production with data, it's totally different to what we thought was going to happen. We've seen this over and over again, where designing your company so you can iteratively ship to a small group of users first and then work with them and gradually add more functionality in means that the product quality just goes up and up over time. The key thing is to not move on from it. Like you have to keep iterating and like give ownership. Like if we want to build like our next product, I won't pull a load of engineers off our existing stuff. Like we need to hire more people to pull that off. Otherwise, existing products will be kind of crappy. So you got to be careful, but like this is really what we're going for, and like this has massively helped us. But yeah, thank you very much.
Wow, amazing. I have one. Awesome, really, like, I think this is so different from many companies I saw or organization. Super interesting, yeah. We have a lot of questions here. We can't make all of them because we only have like 7 minutes. I'll pick one here and then we just use another one from the audience. I have one here. If everyone is able to build things, features, that they think makes sense, how do you and who does decide in the end which to release?
So the engineers pick. So if I'm an engineer and I have a complete belief that I want to build feature X, and if every other person in the company thinks it's a bad idea, they will build feature X. And then we will just track what happens next and we'll build some data. Basically, it's like, if you truly believe that, prove us wrong and do it. The best example, we have like all these queries of our data because we have lots of analytics tools. And these queries were all like written by different people. They're kind of messy. And then bugs appear, inconsistencies appear. It causes issues for users because, hey, there are just bugs in our graphs or whatever. And one of our engineers was like, I'm not going to listen to these users. Like, I actually don't think I want to fix these bugs one at a time. I'm going to build a new query engine entirely and then migrate everything over. And it's going to be this massive project. And he got like 25 comments being like, these are all the reasons why this is a bad idea. You will be doing this the rest of your life and it will never get completed. And he went, screw you guys. And then he stayed up till 3 in the morning for 3 days and built the basic version of it and got it working. He managed to build something that got rid of a whole category of bugs we're having. He managed to also give our users access to it so they could write SQL instead of clicking buttons in our product. And it was a wildly popular feature that like only an engineer would have thought of rather than me as a less technical person. So yeah, we will back people like that. We will ship that feature, though, would have been shipped to a small number of users early on, and then we would have seen what happened. But it is more of a like very fast iterative belief over like a product manager has approved this, for example.
Do you also throw out some features when you see, okay, it doesn't work? Or is that regularly happen in your organization?
Probably not enough, if I'm honest with you. I think we do have a few features that are a bit half-baked because they didn't get much usage, but they didn't get negative feedback either. So I think that's an area that we're not that good at, if I'm honest.
Okay, somebody here in the room. Yeah.
Thank you, James, for your sharing. My name is Sergey. I really appreciate this idea of trust and transparency. I have two related questions. First of all, what are your main channels, communication channels? As I understood, website and internal channel. And second, how do you manage risk of noise, informational noise? Because one of the best approach to hide the information is to put it in the mountain of information.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the main channel for us is ultimately our website. So we have a really big focus on principles. So instead of kind of, again, it's sort of, I said earlier, I don't focus on prioritization, focus on communication. Setting principles around your product and how your business should work is what I sort of mean by that. So for example, as we build more products over time, we're like, hey, how come some of these products, like my co-founder and I would talk about, why are some of these products like so slow to build? And we'll go, oh, well, this product, we thought about pricing before we shipped it, before we shipped the MVP. That was a mistake. So we'll go, a principle is we don't think about pricing before we build a product anymore. We'll just ship it and then figure it out once we get usage. That will go into our handbook. And that then means as we're scaling and adding more engineers in and we're like doubling the business or whatever, we don't have to explain this over and over again to people because it's not ephemeral. Whereas like the reason why like Slack, for example, isn't as good is Slack's ephemeral, it disappears. So having this like living document of like this is the decision making and how this is like our brain as an organization has been really powerful. So like I'll update the handbook, but like our team will too. So ultimately, my job at PostHog, I'm like a product manager for the business is my product, and like I don't want to work in like, my product, the business, I don't want it to have lots of approval steps, or for me to have to make any of the individual decisions on what we're shipping. But I want to come up with a way that can happen without me being involved, which is okay. I'm gonna have to decide it a couple of times, but I'll just memorialize it as a principle instead. Ray Dalio's book Principles is really interesting on this topic. I have forgotten the second part of your question. Oh, how'd you get the noise? Yeah, so we use growth reviews to do this. So there's tons of noise being generated by lots of engineers working across all these different products. How do you know what's going on? We report everything back by product. So I can look across the whole org and go, hey, how's our overall revenue or usage doing? But like the product managers will make sure that I can also go, hey, within like product analytics, we have like a bolt-on product called groups where you can look at like groups of users, how they're doing like a business. And they will have put, I can like zoom all the way down to like, okay, I can see how our group analytics bolt-on is doing from like an adoption, like retention, expansion kind of perspective, for example. So PMs would put the work in to keep that information really structured and really neat and tidy.
Okay, here is another question from online. It's about internal infrastructure teams. Yeah, does PM role make sense for teams developing platform used by other internal teams? No further delivery to further deliver core products to customers, so no direct link to end customers.
Yeah, this is probably, if I'm ever going to cry at work, it's probably because of platform teams. I found this the hardest. We do still call them product engineers. So when we're looking for engineers, like our infrastructure is a really big deal to us. We process, like we have something like 2 billion with a B end users being tracked by software because our customers track their users. So we have this massive volume of data coming in. And so scalability is really, really painful part of our products. And we have like a team that do infrastructure, and that's a big part of it. It does still take a product, someone who can think like product in that team. So within the team, there'll be a bunch of like distributed systems engineers who have worked at hyperscale companies with tons of data because they need the experience. But we will make sure there is at least one engineer who is both technical enough to be able to talk to them about what they're building on, but have been product minded. So it actually started in that particular team. My co-founder is a full stack developer by background, and so he was like, I'm going to just be the team lead for that team for a bit because he's a founder. He's he's broader and able to think from a product perspective. Since then, we have eventually found people who've been like, I've been working in infrastructure roles at like Uber or Facebook or whatever, but I've also founded a technical business. So we would look for like a technical founder who has also got the experience, which is very tough hiring wise. But that is what we just keep going until we get that. But that's why it's been so hard. But that has been really important to us. We've tried having a product manager run that team. And it was like cataclysmically bad. Like we just couldn't, it kind of went against our culture too much. Like they were then kind of picking what to build. And the team were like, hey, this person's putting all these docs together and no one's reading them, was the outcome. So we just kept going until we found a good culture fit engineer that we thought could cope. But we just didn't give up on trying to find the right person.
Interesting. I think we have another question here.
Hi, yeah, I'm Shannon with UserSnap. Thanks for your presentation. It was really transformative. I feel very nervous, honestly, listening to this, because what it means to me as a product leader is that we're saying we don't need people to consolidate and align all this information. So the transparency is huge. What makes it difficult, I think, for your engineers might be deciding how to digest all of that and how to prioritize, because you said you don't prioritize, but someone has to make the decision in the end of the day. So I'm going, okay, so your engineers are thinking about impacts to customers, bugs that are coming through from CS. They're thinking about opportunities that they can leverage and bets they can make. They're thinking about how do they optimize the skills within the team, not stepping on anyone else's toes, and what's the best experience for the user. That's a lot of pressure for an engineer. Like, how do you help them traverse all that information to make the best decision if you're not utilizing PMs?
Sure. Yeah, I think it is a good question, and like I do think it is like I don't think it's like a totally existential threat to PMs. I think it will probably get more. I think the ratio of PMs to engineers may change if this expands more, where there'll be fewer PMs, it'll be harder, but like they have more of an impact perhaps. I think the skill is almost being less conscientious than, I think PMs are typically extremely conscientious people. Like they're kind of putting everything together and they're kind of the glue between all these teams that don't do a great job of explaining what they care about or whatever. I think it's almost like you need to dial back the conscientiousness and increase how much you're trying to coach other people to do what you would have done. So I think it becomes more of a coaching, challenging role. The reason we're structured like this is when we did Y Combinator, when we were tiny, I was like, I'm like, okay, we want to build all these products. How do we get high productivity? I was like, well, who has the highest productivity? Like, which types of companies ship the most stuff per person? And I was like, well, startups do. And like, I think Y Combinator startups are probably pretty high on the list. And I was like, well, the way Y Combinator works is there are all these two-person teams. So in our batch, there's probably like, they do multiple batches of startups per year of like a couple of hundred with companies in each batch. And 200 companies is only about 400, it will be 400, like, each company is usually 2 people to start off with. So they build like 200 products with just about 400 people, which is outrageously high as a productivity. Obviously, the products are half-baked and broken and crappy and stuff, but still, there's very high productivity. I was like, well, how come people are so productive? And it's like, well, they don't have to like convince a bunch of other people to do what they want to do. They talk directly to users. But the thing I think a PM is doing, YC also gives you mentorship. So they get kind of like, you'll talk to someone who can pattern match across all of these businesses. So they have these like partners who've run other businesses before, who's kind of like your coach. And you'll meet them once a week, once every 2 weeks. and they'll just challenge you. And they'll just say, like, so instead, they won't look at all your errors or your user feedback or whatever, but they'll just be like, is your revenue up or down? Like, is anyone using it? And like, they just start asking the questions that a product manager should be asking themselves. But instead of you also answering it as a product manager, you're just giving it to your engineers instead. It's that. So I think challenging. I think the second is trying to avoid your engineers, like having to, you don't want them to pull together that context. Like, we don't want our engineers to be, I'm going to dig through like 500 tickets that have come in the last month or whatever. So it would be something like, they'll produce a doc. Like a product manager might go, hey, proactively, I'm just going to go, here's all the summary, here's like kind of what I can see with some data behind it. And this is what the data is roughly telling us from a support perspective. So doing like the kind of context gathering on the tickets and stuff and summarizing it. And then, but then instead of trying to make decisions, just challenging the team with the types of business questions that you're probably trying to answer historically. Instead, the answer is just coming from an engineer rather than from you. So it's very much like you're trying to help them think like a product manager should without them having to look through loads of bugs or whatever. And they probably will have a sense because like our engineers also do support until our products get very popular. So they will feel the pain because we're trying to solve the root cause. We're not trying to hire more support people as a business. We'd rather have less spend there. But yeah, kind of coaching, context setting, that's much more the focus. And that, I think getting good at things like SQL are the kind of thing that I would be doing if I were a product manager. Because again, you can pull more context by saying, hey, I'm going to just analyze like high-paying customers, for example. So being really good on the analytics side, I think will get more important.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. It was super interesting. Congratulations to putting up such a company and such a company culture. I think this is really unique. I never heard something like that. Very, very good. Thank you very much. Here is a little present for you.